Hey, what's happening, y'all? So, welcome to the defensive part of the New York Jets core for the team. I covered the offensive side a couple of days ago. I posted my thoughts on specifically related to the draft, who some targets may be, some later round picks, maybe some earlier ones that we can target that would help kind of build out the remaining chemistry, synergy of the team, and hopefully make the most of the talent that we already had on the roster, and maybe emphasize some other ones that maybe are a little bit lesser known. So either way, let's get into it. So starting off with the defensive line, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I only did one person per position for the offense, just with the amount of players that we'll probably look to keep on the defensive line. I went with two. And again, there shouldn't really be any necessarily surprises per se with these picks, but it's going to be Quentin Williams and John Franklin Myers. Um, Obvious reasons. Quentin Williams looking to come up on contract negotiations. I'm sure maybe some lighter prep work has already been done. Um, but we'll probably be looking to really solidify things by next year for sure. That way, he's not really playing on like a lame duck contract year. Either way, he's essentially the future of the defensive line, unless something goes very terrible in the upcoming season here. But he's been doing phenomenal. I just seen a recent stat too where he ranks, I think it was sixth in sacks in the last two seasons in the league. So while there's been a little bit of debate about was he worth the number three pick, all in all, we can't say he's been a miss. He might not be, jumping through the stratosphere on an Aaron Donald type tip, but he's definitely been a successful pickup for us in round one. The other player is going to be John Franklin Myers. So he recently signed his extension. I want to say he got 55 million over 3 years, if I remember correctly. Either way, it was well deserved. He came over. He had some stints. Most recently with the Rams prior to coming over with us, but it was a good addition. He came in. He offered some versatility, so being able to rush from the inside as well as the outside, meaning we can kind of flip him around and do as we need to, depending on the teams that are coming up and maybe what weaknesses on the line lent itself to us. But he's definitely been most effective on the interior. So having him paired up with Quentin Williams is kind of the ideal dream scenario, I would imagine. Keep in mind, we still got Carl Lawson on one side. I pretty much just didn't include him due to us not really being able to see him this year at all. We know what preseason looked and sounded like, but we got to have some regular season production. And then on the other side, I'm expecting, and this is going to be my draft pairing for it, that at number four, we're probably looking at George Karloftis from Purdue, unless Kayvon Thibodel falls to us somehow. Personally, for me, I've been becoming a much bigger fan of George Karloftis, just because I think he has the overall skill set of maybe being able to do both in the power and speed aspect of rushing the opponent. So as he continues to develop, I think he can be a multiple threat in terms of where we can line him up and what kind of things we can do on the defensive line. Kayvon Thibodeau, we know, essentially has the build in the athletic profile to probably become whatever he can, or at the very least, maybe an elite tier, speed rusher. But maybe it might be a one-way threat. He has some power to his game, but at least in the early stages of him beginning his pro career, maybe not something that's going to be a go-to move for him. But George Karloftis kind of offers the antithesis to it. We get some power with him now, but he has very underrated speed, and he might be able to develop moves in both realms, just so that he has the maximum ability to rush the passer over the course of his career. Also, just kind of like his backstory and stuff. There's a good article on Bleacher Report I would recommend you guys to check out that just kind of gave some background for a recent interview he did. Moving into the linebacker position, this one's probably the most underrated. And there's a lot of places to go with it. I did think about, obviously, CJ Mosley. I just don't think he'll be with the team long term and say he's a core piece. Quincy Williams was pretty much right there for me with what the pick was going to be, but I ultimately kind of sided on somebody that I think if he was able to actually fully develop over the course of the season, we may have seen some really great things from year one, much like we did with most of the other class, and that's going to be Jamie and Sherwood. The biggest thing I can point to is while we know him and as well as running mate Hamza Nasruddin, they were underrated because their safety converts. But ultimately, and I think we're talking like week 3 or week 4 of the regular season when he got his first start with CJ Mosley going down. It was Jamien Sherwood that Robert Saleh turned the signal calling responsibilities over to. His mental acuity for picking up the game and the defensive scheme and what they were running had to at least have been on par with what CJ. I won't say on par. It had to at least be up there for him to be consciously making that decision, assuming that we did bring in a Quincy Williams. We did have Noah Dawkins on the team. We did have Gerard Davis still. I don't remember if he was still working through injury stuff at that point, but still, we had other options that wouldn't have been a rookie that we could have relied on, and he still had at least some of the athletic traits that we picked him up for to convert him to safety that would have been prominent at least in the early going. So it didn't really pan out that way. You know, the first starts for him came. I think he had. I want to say he had. No, he just had the one because he ended up being hurt. And tearing his ACL. But ultimately, yeah. So the big thing is going to be the mental pickup of the game for him. I think as he develops physically and kind of gets into the NFL weight training program, which, you know, the ACL tear kind of hinders that a bit. But as he develops the body a little bit more, maybe it'll pick up where he's at mentally on the game. I think he was a little bit more apprehensive maybe with all the responsibilities and, you know, having to take over for CJ Mosley at the time. But needless to say, he could definitely be the future. And one of the guys that I'm looking at that we could potentially bring in, which would be like a middle round selection, at least if he doesn't continue to improve after the combine, is going to be Chad Mumma. It's a name that I've been seeing float around a lot more often. It was one of the first things that draw me to looking at the linebacker class. Of course, outside of the, you know, the Kobe Deans of the world and stuff like that. But Chad Mumma just kind of has some of the immediate instincts of the game that I think allows him to be a playmaker. Once the mental part picks up, you know, once as well he gets some physical conditioning for the rigors of the NFL season, he's somebody that maybe can stand out as like a poor man's, and the name just escaped me, but he could be a poor man's Luke Kuechly. There we go. Or at least somebody that displays, you know, the strong coverage ability, and then maybe offers at least solid production in terms of being able to run, play the run, play the pass, but maybe somebody we can look to as a playmaker, at least in the coverage game, which is something I think we're really lacking. Even CJ Mosley, which as good as average or, you know, as above average as you want to call it, with him returning from his two seasons of injury, basically, he's still even graded pretty poorly in coverage aspects. If you take a look at least like the PFF breakdowns and any other metrics that you really want to pull up. So that might be something that kind of helps boost the roster right away with somebody that can potentially develop other aspects of the game, but at least in the very meantime, that'll be what we look for in year one for him. Can he produce the way he was producing in college, which would be in a coverage role? It doesn't mean that he has to come in and start and, you know, play 80% of the snaps right away. But as a developmental prospect, we'll call it, in the mid-tier rounds, that could potentially offer that immediate contribution as an impact player. I think that's as, you know, good as we can ask for considering what we just got out of the previous draft. Now, taking a look at the cornerback side of things, I wanted to really pick Bryce Hall. It's my guy. I've actually liked his game a fair amount of time now. I thought he showed some pretty good glimpses the end of year one, and then moving into year two, we've seen him pretty much go toe to toe with some of the top tier receivers in the class. And, you know, one of my favorite games is always going to be seeing kind of what happened with the Cincinnati Bengals matchup, with him going from Jamar Chase to some of the other various threats that they have out on the team. Trey Higgins, for example, you know, different body types, different physical qualities, speed versus the size, and kind of boxing people out and things like that he had to deal with. So it was good stuff there. But Michael Carter II, I think the specialized slot cornerback position has really evolved into much more than what a lot of people remember it being early on in the seasons. So the biggest thing, and Robert Saleh touched on it, I kind of recapped some of this in previous videos as well, would be he really likes the cornerback group that we already have and some of the players that are in the room. The biggest difference between us maybe taking that leap and being recognized on a national level, as opposed to just people internally that are fans of the Jets, would be that we need more playmaking capability. We only had, I believe, 7 interceptions as a whole for the season, and only 2 of those by cornerbacks, and both of those were by the rookie Brandon Echols, who just as easily could have been the pick. But I think we'll see more of an impact from Michael Carter if we get the actual production out of him in terms of forced fumbles, any other kind of turnovers he can make. He has the ability to rush the passer as well with some of that sneaky speed, and then if he can capitalize on some interceptions, we're definitely easily talking about like a top 10 cornerback in the NFL. So all the aspects of things that we're looking for in this game are there. We just need him to take it to another level. Now, since we're talking about him being kind of one of the core pieces to build around, and we do need better production on the exterior boundary positions at the quarterback position, one of the players that I'm falling in love with, and personally, if you guys have kept up with many of the videos, you'll hear how often I'm kind of chatting up a lot of the players from the Cincinnati team that just ended up going to the college football playoffs. And that's because I think what they built in that program there, and those players that got established there, are really what a lot of teams are either looking for or missing on their teams already. So we're talking about bringing in players that already have a lot of bravado. They have the production proving. You go undefeated for a whole season. You can't say you have a bunch of busters on the team. So there's 2 players I'm looking at. One of them, Cincinnati, is going to be Kobe Bryant. He's the other tag team tandem to Ahmad Sauce Gardner. And he ended up picking up a lot more targets because so many people were fearful of throwing the Sauce Gardner's side. And, you're talking about a cornerback in Sauce that's never allowed a touchdown throughout his entire college career. And it's not like you're saying he played, 50 snaps or anything like that. We're talking about a true top tier number 1 cornerback. So you flip to the other side and you still see what Kobe Bryant's been able to do. And some of the outlook there, we're talking the ball skills, and the championship pedigree, even though they weren't able to win the entire thing, that he will bring over to the team. And he'll probably specifically be developed as a boundary cornerback, so we won't really have to worry about any kind of overlap or position versatility for him, which could be a little bit of a buzzkill, but at the same time, it allows that specific player to really just work on honing that specific craft, and what the techniques they're going to teach are going to be are. Now, kind of the best situation that's going to work with that is he's able to do a lot of both in man and zone coverage, with zone kind of being more of his priority. Now, he'll be able to win in man, which is what Robert Saleh is looking for, but he'll be able to make probably his bread and butter as somebody that'll be able to be reactionary and get to the ball in the zone coverage. So the other player, and this is somebody I was looking into again, as I wanted to kind of give you guys some later round picks and not just the players everybody will know in round 1. Tariq William, UTSA. The kid is kind of everything that we looked for when we picked up like Brandon Echols and Jason Pinnock and all of these players that were more athletes than players that might fit in at the positions they played in at college. Tariq William used to be a wide receiver, and I think he played a little bit of quarterback from what I remember checking up on, but he checks off everything on the physical capabilities box. He has plus size. I think he was about 6'3" and like 210. He has the arm length that we're looking for. He was reported to run, and we'll probably see this at the combine, somewhere in like the 4.3s. And then he's able to come down and run support, as well as having some position versatility the way UTSA played him, where they had him on the exterior. They had him at the slot. They even had him playing some single high, some 2 safety looks, and then even a couple stints of like the linebacker spot. So he can come in, not necessarily have to worry about playing whatsoever. Maybe, develop himself while he's working on special teams, and then come in year 2. We might have a guy that can, flourish in the league. So we're talking about essentially establishing kind of like a Legion of Boom mindset. It's more position archetypes that we're looking for now, And none of this is new. Robert Saleh, again, has mentioned all of this. He doesn't mind having the athletes that he can coach up. There's just certain things that you can't coach, like the speed, the strength, crazy agility, things like that. So he might be a sneaky good player that if a team picks up and allows him to really hone in on his craft, they can come away with potentially Pro Bowl, all pro caliber type cornerback. It'll just take a little bit of investment and definitely a little bit of time. I don't think we'll really see him produce in year one. Finally, though, for the safety position, it's really slim pickings. It reminds me a lot of kind of what I talked about at the tight end spot on offense. It's not really a whole lot there in terms of players that may stick around or, continue to contribute depending on who we add in. But Jason Pinnock's going to be my guy. So, for us having to throw him in to the safety position and convert him during the season like that when he's expected to play cornerback, he came in and did pretty well. He was able to make some plays happen, I think he forced, it was either 2 or 4 fumbles during those games. I want to say it's 2 realistically. He was able to get a couple tackles for loss, and then just overall he was productive for the people that like the tackle statistics. So it's about as much as you could have asked for. He didn't necessarily look overwhelmed. He didn't necessarily pop on the film like an Elijah Riley did, but he was able to make some of the plays that lent itself to him. So, some of the exit interviews and some of the things that are released after the season showed him talking about how excited he is knowing what would be available for him in the safety room. With us not having any proven players there as a way for him to get that playing time, and just looking forward to him developing there is all plus signs from a player that really probably wasn't going to get on the field in year one at all, and he was able to make some things happen late in the season. So, Elijah Riley easily could have been the pick, but somebody that we drafted that we know is probably going to at least see through his rookie contract and was able to show us a little something there at the end, I think was the smart way to go here. Now, honestly, when it comes to the draft at the cornerback and safety positions, when we're talking later on, safety specifically was a little bit harder to really check out a bunch of scouting reports and stuff, and I just didn't have the time recently to really dive into any game film. So if you guys have any feedback and comments on some of the 3 players here I'm going to mention, I'd definitely love to have it. But from some of what I've seen as a pairing that we can potentially bring in and maybe get some decent production out of year one with the ability to actually be a long-term starter, I went with Yusuf Corker. But 2 other players that I'm looking at as well, and these all range from somewhere between middle tier picks to maybe somebody in like the 6th round that most of us aren't going to be aware of. But Yusuf Corker, Brian Cook, and Damani Richardson. More realistically, I think I'm still expecting to see, when it comes to the secondary, us picking up a player between the 4th and the 6th round. If we end up recouping like a 6th round pick. But either way, when it comes to Yusuf Corker, so we're talking about a player that has some explosive capabilities. So if we're talking about the athlete mode there again, with them having maybe qualities you won't normally see at a player at their position, or at least what would be their new position, which these aren't converts in any way. The only issue is going to be he has the explosiveness, all the athletic stuff, nothing super elite tier or anything. But he has issues being undisciplined. So, it can lead to some penalties. It can lead to, missed tackles, some whiffs, especially since he's coming in as kind of like a downhill thumper. And some of his lanes aren't always the best, but we're talking year one output. He might be a high quality special teams core player with the potential to develop into a player at the strong safety position. He's not really going to be a free safety, single player coverage type of player for us at all. But I think the biggest thing there is the safety class was a little bit harder later on to pinpoint, saying we can see players doing multiple things. These are really people that'll probably end up having a defined role at some point. Another Cincinnati player that I did have in mind was Brian Cook. A couple things. So he had a low snap count overall. 3 seasons in college overall. I want to say they were all with Cincinnati. He ended up having to sit behind some players for a while, but then his final years when he was able to actually get significant playing time. Now, he's a little bit more reactionary than being able to anticipate plays on the field, but he was still able to actually make some things happen. So I think projection wise, immediately for him, we're talking about a player that can make a handful of plays, but essentially he'll come in and be like a tone setter for us. He'll be able to come in and kind of lay the boom on a couple people. We haven't really had anybody like that patrolling the backfield for a while prior to Jamal Adams, since, I don't know, maybe like Laren Landry, somebody like that. So it would kind of be nice to get that mindset and attitude back into the fold on the back end there to make people think a little bit twice about throwing some of those crossing routes or maybe going deep down the field. And you got that player coming in front of you. The final player is going to be Damani Richardson. At least for his final season, he's a high IQ player from what we were able to pick up on. He ended up becoming the signal caller for the defense. The real backlash for him is going to be that he hasn't necessarily been consistent in man coverage, which, I mean, out of all the three players, it sounds like necessarily he's had the best report. So, I mean, who knows? I ended up going with Yusuf Corker, but I would definitely be happy with either one of these three. Keep in mind, we probably need to sink one or two picks into the secondary, and those will probably both end up being safety slots. Primarily, we'll kind of see what happens with free agency and what we do at the cornerback spot. But before I let you guys go, just a couple other names for the cornerback position as well. So we talked about Tariq William. We talked about Kobe Bryant. I did have Darion Kendrick, who offered a little bit of position versatility, play recognition, kind of potentially being a plus for him since he used to play on offense, and then being a little bit more of a zone cornerback. He might fit in a little bit better right away. I also had Jermaine Waller I looked at. He's more specifically a man corner. He just ends up having kind of like Damani Richardson, a little bit more of consistency issues in his technique, and maybe leaving some plays out on the field that he could have made. Was he in the right position and things like that? And then Mario Goodrich, excellent run defender. He's somebody that can potentially stand out in that facet right away for us. He's also, expected to maybe run in the 4.4s, which will be great. Having somebody that has that speed component at the cornerback position is great when you're talking about people like the Jamar Chases that are coming in and, blowing the top off of defenses, because somebody can't really stay with them after, maybe 15 yards down the field. His biggest thing is just going to be strength improvement and kind of getting his change of direction improved upon a little bit. He's been bullied a little bit by players at various positions. So it's not like, he just has a offensive lineman he's trying to fight off or anything like that. You got a wide receiver maybe with the same build or smaller, just kind of out muscling him in press. So there's some things there to work out, but let me know who you guys think might be good fits. And, as I mentioned before, some of the feedback from maybe some of the players that I had here that I might not have known about. I still got some games I want to check out, but appreciate everything as normal, guys. I'll catch up with you again once I get a chance to get some more content under the belt, but catch you.